Hi there, Mark here, back again. Still in our coronavirus lockdown, so another in detail video to try and keep you guys entertained and hopefully informed a bit about what MGBs are all about. So this time we're going to talk about the interior of the MGB, and in true lockdown fashion, that means it's quite a safe one to do because people sort of walking down our road, I'll be in my car safe from any germs as they walk past. So talking about the interior of the car, then we'll kind of work front to back, and for that I'll probably need to move the camera from there onto a stick so I can kind of show you the controls and things. And yeah, let's do that now. So we're starting here on the passenger side, and one of the things you sort of notice when you get into an MGB is how much legroom you've got actually. So if you're sitting here with sort of your knees up like this, it feels like you're a bit sort of crammed in, but your legs can actually stretch right out in front, right into like the engine bay kind of thing. And that's loads of room there, so it's quite easy to get comfortable and things like that. I mean, the headroom as well in the GT model is pretty decent, and the only thing that kind of is a bit bad is the fact that you've got like this visor for that. If you've got like one of the Britax or Webasto sunroofs, you have this sort of wind deflector thingy that can sometimes get in the way, but only for sort of taller drivers there. So on the passenger side, in this particular model, on the Mark 1, you've got this cool sort of map light, nice sort of chrome light here with a toggle to turn it on and off. The ignition's not on, so that's why that's not turning on. Hang on, let me try that. There we go, that's nice, isn't it? If you wanted to read your map in this corner over here, no good for the driver of course, because there's no illumination over there. So it's only very much a sort of navigator's privilege to have that map for map reading only. So moving across then, we've got our glove compartment, lockable glove compartment, which is good. We've put some nice handy cloths in there, some random cable tie and some other junk that I've got. And the previous owner actually has written down the tyre pressures inside there, which is a pretty handy thing to do, but I've since swapped the wheels, so they're no good to me now. Moving our way over, we have the heater controls, so temperature at the top, and then whether it comes out of the screen vents or the footwell down here underneath, or I'm not sure if you do a mixture, I don't know. But then I don't know whether the heater was an option on these cars as well. I mean, the ones I've had have all come with it, and I've had this one, which is a Mark 1, one from the mid-70s and a 1980 model, and they've all had heaters. And actually, kind of talking about heaters and map reading lights and looking down at the fully carpeted floors, you kind of realise that this is quite a comfortable car to be in, if you compare it to some other sports cars of the time. So if you look at, for example, at like a midget or even the inside of a Mini, they have sort of bare metal and things, well, painted metal showing in various parts of it. But this is fully trimmed, this interior, so it's a bit more of a sort of step up in terms of luxury, in my opinion, even though it's still a sort of mass-produced sports car for the masses. So working our way over, then we've kind of got our switches here, and these are very much, you know, the sort of famous sort of toggle switches for these cars of the 50s and 60s. There's nothing really special about these, but I think they really look really great because this is kind of the switches that you'd see in James Bond's Aston Martin gadget panel, and they're just functional. I mean, I've added these labels underneath because they all look the same, these switches. So the fan and the wipers, I used to get confused, and by adding these, it kind of makes it a bit more sort of James Bondy gadget, which is just a bit tacky, I know, but I love it. And then I've got my manual wash in the middle, which I talked about in another video, how the previous owner, or a previous owner, has left the manual wash but introduced also an electric button under here to sort of make that process a little less, I suppose, little more effortless, rather than having to pump away on this to try and keep the screen wash flowing. But I mean, I rarely use the car when it needs to have the screen washed anyway, so that's just there for the rare times that I might need it. Next to that, ignition key goes in there, which is kind of, you know, I mean, it's pretty plain and boring, but it just shows how cars have changed over the years. Having the key going in the dash was pretty common back then, but obviously modern cars kind of have put that back into fashion and stuff. But for years and years after this, the keys always used to be down by the steering wheel and operate the steering lock. And actually, I think later cars, that ignition key is by the steering wheel and operates the steering lock. But in these early ones, it is very much right in the middle of the dash there. Then we've got our choke, and then we've got our light switch. So you just pull it out to do side lights, and out again to do the main beam. And then in the middle here, what we've got is where you would normally have a radio. So this has just got the blanking plate in here at the moment because I don't have a radio, and I think it was a sort of an option to have one. So some would have come with this blanking plate if someone hadn't specified a radio, and also what you would have had down here would have been a single speaker, which I've swapped out for a Android tablet to display satellite navigation and my sort of information from my ignition system, so it can show sort of the advanced curve and revs, and it's got a GPS Speedo feature built into that. So it's kind of another sort of James Bond gadget I've got there, and I've got a video on how I did that elsewhere on my channel. So the other thing I didn't mention as well is on this blanking plate I've added, just for a bit of like a racing touch, and that's this Hoyer stopwatch. This one's actually broken. The thing's gone to click it, but if you give it a shake, it does actually start going round. So it does, the internals still work, but I quite like the look of that on there, and gives it a bit more of a sort of racy feel. And then we get over to the driver's side, and where the sort of main instrumentation starts. So Smith's gauges all the way across there with chrome bezels. This changed a little bit as the fashion changed throughout the MG's lifespan. I think you get some like black bezels on the later cars with like a little tiny bit of chrome trim, but these are just fairly typical for the time. So the first one's a combination gauge, oil pressure and water temperature. The next one over here is the Speedo, and with your mileage, which mine is reading 11,309, but that's 111,000. It's not as low mileage as that. And above it is the trip counter. So what people tend to do when they get in these cars is they go, how do I reset the trip? And they play with this thing, which is the panel dimming light. So this controls how bright the gauges are. I found that you always need that turned up to maximum, otherwise they're completely illegible at night time. But actually, if you look under here, this little toggle here on mine doesn't work, but that's because the drive inside is gone. Oh, there we go. You kind of have to push it in and twist it. Oh, I've managed to make my trip go up, but not reset. But anyway, this little toggle here is how you reset your trip me. So if you've got a working example, on later cars it's more of a solid sort of button that you use there to reset the trip. Well, that's going to annoy me now, not being able to do that. Oh, there we go. Oh no, I should probably give up on this. Anyway, that's how you do it. And on that Speedo as well, you've got the high beam indicator. So when you push on your stalk to flash someone, then that will light up as a high beam. But if you want to maintain high beam in this particular model of MGB GT, because it's one of the early ones, there's actually a floor operated switch. So that's down here, and if you can see this button here, that's what that does. And it's quite a good idea actually. It means you can keep both hands on the wheel while you sort of operate the main beam with the little button on with your foot, but it does mean that you have to do that instead of operating the clutch, which may or may not be convenient. But yeah, quite a weird period feature there. Then the panel light, as I discussed, and then we've got the rev counter with the ignition warning light on there as well. And as you can see, the sort of orange zone starts at 5,500 revs, and then sort of red zone starts at 6,000 revs, so you don't really want to be going over that. And actually the MGB isn't a high revving engine as standard, and a lot of the torque is way further down the RPM range, so you don't really need to go right up there. Obviously if you've got sort of rally spec or race spec engine, then the power's shifted up into the rev band a bit more, and torque as well, so you'd want to make full use of it. But for a standard car you don't need to go that high. And over here we've got the fuel gauge, which is pretty normal, empty to full. And then the overdrive switch. So this is my overdrive switch. This is kind of like the original style one, although it feels kind of counterintuitive to flick it down for overdrive and up for normal. That kind of feels weird to me, but well, that's how it is. And this is like an added on switch that a previous owners put in here for they were like driving lamps or fog lamps back when they had those, but I've removed them because I didn't like the way they looked particularly. So the last thing, of course, is this steering wheel. This is not a genuinely like original equipment one. This is one I've bought and added on, but it's got the original style horn push with the MG logo on it. The original one would have been a bigger one with kind of black plastic with these like silver spokes going into the middle. Quite an attractive wheel, but I quite like these sort of riveted wooden ones with these nice spokes like this. And this is more of like a racing type of wheel from the time, I suppose, even though it's just a modern reproduction of one. So that's kind of the dashboard. The other controls, of course, are the gear stick, and I've swapped a later aftermarket wooden knob to a correct sort of bakelite one with the gate pattern printed on top. I think that looks pretty cool. And then obviously this chrome surround and rubber boot to finish it off, and the handbrake here as well. So that's kind of all the controls laid out in front of you. And what you'll find actually in the MGB is kind of a mixture of black bakelite plastic and chrome, and you can see it sort of more over here on the door. That's the door handle, that's the door opening lever, and then the window winder as well. Yeah, so I'll just sort of carry on going around, I guess, just explaining the interior features for those of you who are interested. And these are the quarter lights. Now these are quite cool. I mean, I don't know why they opted for these back in the day. I don't know if it's just because of the way that the glass would be manufactured, or you wouldn't be able to get all of it rolled down into the door if it was the full length kind of thing. But they are quite handy, especially when it's a little bit cooler outside, but you still want a way of sort of demisting the screen in addition to the heater, and you can just kind of crack that open. And also for smokers as well, so you can kind of rest your hand on the quarter light there and sort of flick your cigarette ash out of the car, if that was your thing. I think the need for that's become less as less and less people smoke, which is obviously a good thing. So yeah, wind up and down windows, which is really cool. And then at the back you've got your rear windows, not applicable in the Roadster obviously because they have a hood rather than these windows, but these also open like that, which I never ever use, but yeah, it's handy all the same if you wanted to get a bit more air flowing through there. And kind of now the sort of party piece of the GT, and that's the back of the car. And you've got this really handy seat here, but it's not handy because it can fit people to sit on. In fact, it's terrible for that, and I wouldn't recommend it. The seatbelt, you can't get like a 3-point seatbelt on it. I have got like a little tiny child seatbelt here, which I've never used. Again, that's a previous owner one, which I'll just sort of keep it hidden under there because I don't want people to think that that's how I transport my children, because it's really unsafe. But it's perfect for a luggage shelf. So if you're going longer distances and you want to just put a backpack in here, then put it on here, and it's not right at the back of the car where you can't reach it. It's just behind you where you can. And I think it looks nice. I mean, I've got an aftermarket trim set from this company called Mirror Trim with this dark red sort of pleated leather, and I think it looks really good in in here, especially with these sort of light grey carpets, which are also part of the set I got from them. And I think having this nice sort of leather deck behind the front seats just looks really nice and gives it that extra touch of luxury. But it must be said though that behind the seats we've got this really useful cargo area. Again, only applicable in the GT. The Roadsters had a separate boot of similar size, but it's not actually that deep, because you can see there that it's carpeted, but it's actually quite high because it sits on top of the spare wheel and the fuel tank. So there's lots of stuff going on underneath that rear deck, and I'll show you that in a second, because it's worth sort of seeing that sort of features at the back of the car there. So here we are at the back of the car now, and we'll lift up this tailgate to have a look inside, and you can see the sort of useful sort of cargo area here, and as I mentioned, it's a little bit shallow because of what's underneath it. So pulling back this carpet reveals these little studs, and there are these little cubby holes down here, and I actually keep spares on either side. I've got some spares over there, some screen scraper and that kind of thing, but underneath here you've got this wooden board, these quick release bolts, and that reveals, when you lift this up, the spare wheel, which has seen better days, and actually these tyres that look really old, they're Viking Sport. I don't think I've even heard of that brand before owning this car, and obviously jump leads and other various bits. So there's a bottle jack down there, and also got a couple of spare spinners there, and the spanner that you used to loosen it. I've also got the mallet there to get those on and off. So that's all there is to say about this section. And pop this back down again. And then this bench seat, as I mentioned, does if I can do it, fold flat-ish. I think if you had the original trim in there, it would go properly flat. You can remove the seat cushion pretty easily as well, and that gives you a really sort of helpful loading space. But the other sort of nifty thing about this tailgate, actually something which I use it for occasionally at car shows, is if you need somewhere to sit which isn't inside the car, it actually provides quite a decent bench with a little roof. So I've sat here a couple of times and eaten my sausage sandwich in here. I mean, the headroom's a bit limited, but you can sort of sit back here relatively comfortably. You do just have to watch out for the exhaust pipe just down there, but that's yeah, a bit handy. So that pretty much concludes the interior of the car. Hope you enjoyed the video. I mean, not really much to say about the interior except oh, there is actually one last thing, a little secret of the car, and that is about fresh air ventilation inside the cabin. So I mentioned obviously these quarter light things here which you can use to get more air into the cabin, but you'll notice that in these early cars there's no face level ventilation. Later ones, these actually house fresh air vents, and the radio's relocated down there, and the speakers are now in the doors. But on these earlier cars, and actually the later cars as well, there's a little secret flap. On later cars it's actually a bit more obvious. There's like a little stalk that kind of hangs down with a little white dongle on the end. But in these early ones, right up here in this nest of wires is a little thing, and if you pull it, you can see some daylight coming in there, and that is a fresh air vent. And where that goes, it is inside here. So this is kind of the intake for that particular fresh air vent, and also for the heater box as well. But that fresh air vent comes in from there, and it sort of provides foot level fresh air ventilation should you need it. Only really works when you're going along, but something that not everyone might be aware of. And it shuts like that to keep out the draft in the winter. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the interior. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, there'll be more in detail videos to come, I'm sure, as I try and occupy my time during this lockdown. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you later. Bye.